all super proud of your kids and willing to advocate for them, and that's why we're all here. And I imagine that, at home, in the confines of your home, your kids have what they need from you. You're affirming them, you're supporting them. But there's all this stuff happening outside, the worst legislative season and all kinds of anti-trans rhetoric. So just in this moment, can some of you speak to what's the hardest thing about being the parent of a trans or non-binary kid right now, in this moment? What's the hardest thing?
The hardest thing about being a parent to a trans kiddo in this moment is just the swiftness with which these bills keep coming. I mean, it's, as soon as it's like whack-a-mole. Once feel like we fought one, then it's another one. And my daughter is 15 now, and when she was younger, it was so much easier for me to fight for her because I was protecting her from all of the heartache and all of the consequences to all of these sorts of things that we were fighting for. And now it's affecting her daily life. She can't play sports. Her gender affirming care is hanging in the balance. And so having to see her reactions to these things that keep just happening at a breakneck pace has been the hardest thing for me as her mom.
I'm just surprised by the ferocity at which these legislations have come out. And the issue is there's so many more important socially relevant things out there in the world that need to be tackled for our country. And despite that, we are focusing on an issue that is important to us, that should be important to the society, but definitely they should not be something they should be going after. And I think that's what scares me a little.
It seems that this attack, coming up like to an election season, is trying to stir up those feelings of bigotry, trying to stir up to us those feelings of hatred, against a group, what I mean, a demographic that's an easy target that a lot of people still don't understand, have a frame of reference for, can combat mistruths, misinformation, and lies, just outright lies about. And so it kind of feels like a group that you have to protect with the truth of what it is. And my son, he follows it. And sometimes we'll see him in the morning and he's like, what's going on, kiddo? He's like, he just saw something new in the news about his community. And it's hard, but getting him to understand that some people in this country are going after the low-hanging fruit to stir up bigotry and hatred and see it as that, and that's how we're going to fight it.
I was going to piggyback because when you said how he's coming home, so he's at that age where social media and you're seeing things. So as he's trying to develop his self-confidence going out into the world, making that next step of, thinking about college and his future, having this moment that we're having in our country's history is like, it feels so personal to him. They hate me. They don't want me to exist. And having to explain to your child as they're trying to grow into their confidence of who they are as a person, and having the wherewithal to deal with all of that and still feel like you're somebody and that you deserve a future where you can see into it and see all of this success for yourself and all this viable outcomes of wonderful ideas that you have for your future. And it feels like we're combating that all the time, trying to get him to understand that, it's not that everybody hates you and it's not that, everybody's against you. And that's work, and it's scary as we're trying to have that space that our kid needs to grow into himself and to feel confident about himself and his role in the world.
I have a son contemplating college and wanting him to feel like the world is his to do with as he pleases, is recognizing that he can't go everywhere. There are certain places that if he says, I want to go to school in X red state here, I'm not going to be okay with it. And realizing that his options and options of children like him are limited because of what's happening in this country. I'm 53 years old. I would have never imagined growing up that I would be here in this moment in time when we are literally replicating the way things were when blacks were freed, when the civil rights laws first passed, when we were talking about marriage equality. All of these fights where you would think we would have learned our lessons. We would have learned how to not replicate the mistakes of our past. We would learn how to not marginalize people are happening over and over as if we don't have these lessons from the past to teach us. And so I'm very scared for my son simply because I know he cannot go places with impunity. He must be very cognizant and careful with the decisions that he makes, because sometimes and somewhere people may be like, nope, you can't be here, and I'm not going to let you be here, and I'm going to actively, aggressively go after you because I recognize who you are and I don't want you to have whatever it is. And so that's the part that I think is most difficult, is how do we allow our kids to be who they are, recognizing that there's places where you can't just go there being who you are.
The limited sense of where you can go is one of the challenges that we have. It's because there's a lack of a feeling of safety overall. And obviously there's which states to go to, there's intersectional issues. We've talked about raising a black trans man now. But for us, we've worked so hard to have the visibility to bring safety to all of our kids. If you see our kids, you know our kids, you love our kids, you respect our kids. And yet, after doing so much to humanize their experiences for people, the dehumanizing language that's being used to tear that down and to make people feel like it's okay to discriminate, it's okay to harass, and even to harm. And on top of that, every single day, we turn on the news and there's another shooting. There's some tragedy. There are people being killed, and a lot of it is because of amplified hate. It's racism, it's anti-Semitism, it's people showing up with these massive guns at drag queen story times. And our child has that fear of they're going to start connecting the dots pretty soon. They're trying to make us subhuman so that it will then be okay for it not just to be showing up with the guns, but to actually come after us. And it's that sense of fear, and we're trying to just say, we still need to keep living our lives. We need to go out of the house. We need to go to the grocery store. And that's becoming more and more impossible because right now elected officials are focusing on targeting kids who are already struggling instead of focusing on one of the main things that's causing them to struggle, as well as every other kid in this country.
My daughter's being forced to fight for the fact that she even exists. And without all of this is not a priority for her. She is a normal, ordinary teenager. She's worried about school. She's worried about the state of the planet. She's worried about the environment. She's worried about going to college, as you mentioned. And there's all these factors that are now coming into play that not only does she not get to be who she is, but she has to defend it. And she has to defend it against rhetoric and violent language when there are so many other things that we could be focused on. And we are living in a time where there are refugees within the United States, that people are fleeing states because they're not welcome. And that's absurd.
For me, when I try to explain to my friends and to our boy, like that's how terrorism works, to sow fear. To get, and fear mobilizes, fear calcifies your thinking processes, you're under undue mental, psychological, emotional stress. And that's actually its design, to terrorize you, to make you afraid to move forward. And any people or group of people or person who has had to combat that particular tactic to get you to submit to the will or whatever that particular ideology is, that you got to lean into your fear, and you're going to have to fight that. Because the very, fear, apathy, that stops you. You stop pushing back. And if I can get you to do that, it's so much easier to beat you. It's so much easier to get you to do what I want you to do if I can get you afraid of me. And that's one of the teaching tools. There will be no fear. I mean, it's going to be hard, it's going to be sad, it's going to be a lot of tears, but fear is not going to be a part of our moving recipe in life, period.
We've been doing this for 11 years now, and I fought so hard when she was younger because I did not want her to have to fight these fights herself. My goal, my job was to take all of that away from her so she could just live her life. And so for me, it feels somewhat, not a failure, but it's such a letdown that the fight got harder when I thought it was going to get easier.
I too feel as if, you know, despite my advocacy and the work that I've done, I haven't made the world safer for any of my kids. I feel like the world is not a safer place, that we are not handing them off a society that is greater than the society our parents handed us, which is the goal. And so it does feel very much like we're failing and that we can't give them a world that's greater than what was given to us.
Kids just want to be kids. They're looking for belonging amongst their peers. And now what is happening currently in the current state is schools are being targeted, that the kids cannot be, transgender kids cannot go to a bathroom, they cannot play sports. And all those things are going to have significant impact on the child. And as parents, we are trying our best, but we need support from the society, support from the allies who can come together and help us rectify the mistakes, the injustices that our kids are being subjected to.
Can you speak to whether you have had to consider moving? What kind of things come up when you even have to think about that? How does that, added factor come into play especially for those of you in the more hostile areas?
So we live in a state that has the usual lineup of bills. So the sports bill, the parental rights bill, the gender affirming care ban bill. I'm sure there's, the Department of Education, with curriculum bans and all kinds of things. And so we've had to develop a backup plan. Because our child gets gender affirming care, including the medically necessary evidence-based hormones. We have had to talk with families who live out of state and say, here's our plan in the event that this all gets shut down in our state. We've already talked about who's staying, who's going, what's going to be the impact to our job, what's going to be the impact to our family. And it is so scary and frustrating because we feel like so much of our life is on pause while we wait to see what happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's that, I agree. We sort of feel like we're not in control of our own life right now. And being Jewish, this feels very familiar. And my husband has always said, there were people that did not leave Germany in time because it was too late. And I don't want us to get to the point where it's too late. Watching, I live in Georgia, and watching Florida, where now, kids are it's legal for the state to take a child away during custody battles, and what's the next thing from that happening, and can it affect us, and what are we going to do, and where are we going to go? And thank God we have the resources to get out, but there is a part of me that is afraid that we are going to wait 1 minute too late.
Like Jennifer said, this has happened before. Mm-hmm. There is precedent for what's happening. If you go back in the history of this country, after emancipation, you had this literal migration of people away from the South because the South was not a safe place to live. You could be a free man and picked up and put right back in slavery. And we're talking about the home of the free, the land of the brave, where you should not have to think about being a refugee, as Mike said. There is simply nothing American about what's happening, and yet it's so American what's happening. Leaving your state to go to another state in the borders of this country is simply not acceptable. We should not accepted. People who are not impacted by this, who do not have transgender, non-binary, gender non-conforming kids, should not be sitting back thinking, oh, well, it doesn't affect me. It affects us all. This affects every single last one of us. If one of us is not free, none of us are free.
Absolutely.
If you were sitting in front of a lawmaker who's supporting a bill like this, like what are some things you would say? We talked a lot earlier about, you know, these things are lies. These things are simply not true. Here's what you need to know. Can you speak? It's like, what would you want to say from your heart and or your mind to the legislators who are, you know, pushing these bills and sometimes not even realizing the harm that they're doing?
I have sat in front of legislators and I have told them our story, and I have cried, and I have tried to get sympathy and, you know, at some feeling of empathy, and I don't think they care. And to me, that's the scariest part of it, because how are we ever going to find our way out of this? So my response now to legislators is, how dare you? How dare you come after my family? How dare you come after my kid?
I have identical twins, you know, a cisgender son and a transgender female. And if my cisgender son had excess breast tissue because of just hormones, it would be not a problem at all for him to have surgery to correct the appearance of his chest to help him with how he feels about himself. But if it's a trans man or trans young man, that same surgery is, you know, seen completely differently. So they're not even trying to hide their discrimination. They're just packaging it up and saying that other parents have rights, but we don't have rights because we are abusing our children.
A lot of these legislatures are also championing parents' rights, whether it be through schools or anything else, but I'm a parent too. And I also have rights, so you can't discriminate against me for the greater good. That's not how this works. And there are legislators who don't care. This is what they have set in their head, and you can present them with the evidence, and they're going to cherry pick new, old evidence. They're going to cherry pick from things that support their cause, and we have found in real life that presenting them with the truth doesn't matter. It doesn't sway them. They have a goal in mind, and we are the end result.
I feel like we probably should pivot our attention toward the people that we can bring to our side, that we can raise up an army of allies, right? Even people who are willing to just be slightly positive, maybe not negative, but just slightly positive. We can just bring them over and try to encourage people to vote. We increase voter registration. The only way out of this is actually political, honestly. We have to have people in office who will change the course of events, because this is where we are. We're in a political state. And unfortunately, I just don't see how else we're going to get it done.
Well, let me pivot back to the parents' rights thing. What do you want to say to your neighbor, to the other parents standing on the soccer sidelines with you, or going to the PTA meetings with you, or sitting next to you in the pews at church or synagogue or mosque? What do you want them to know about you and your family?
If this were your child, you would absolutely see me at your side. I'd be in front of you. I'd be beside you. I'd be behind you. I would go to the ends of the earth to make sure your child was protected and safe. So what the fuck are you not doing by my side, in front of me, beside me, behind me, making sure that my child is protected? And if you don't have an answer for me, then you can keep moving, because you're not a friend. And I have to acknowledge that not everybody in my family, in my circle, is a friend, is an ally, is an accomplice, is an advocate, is somebody that I can rely on. And it's only in this moment that I become aware of some of the failings of the people around me. I have to acknowledge and accept that. I have to, because at the end of the day, I only need people who are going to go balls to the wall with me for my child. If you're not that, I don't need you. I'm cutting you off. Like, cut the fat and keep it moving, because we're not at a time where people can sit idly by on the sidelines and be like, oh, well, that moment has long since passed. And so for me, it's like, are you here with me or not. That's it. No floundering, no evict. You have to be able to answer that question. And if you can't, keep it moving.
In addition to what you're saying, because we share some blood in that regard, I think that there is a significant portion of the population that truly does not know a trans person. They do not have any concept of a person who's trans, what their experience might be in life. So there is a component of education, I think. I think we are in a position to help those people who are willing to listen and be open-minded, open-hearted about our children and people like them. So there are people out there that I still believe, that we can bring them to our side to help advocate for our children, or like I said, just be slightly not negative, right? So we can get them to the not negative position, and I do think that there is progress to be made in that area, and this is something I think we're all trying to do, right? We're trying to strategize. We're constantly doing this, right? How do we figure out, how do we get this message to people? How do we let them know that our kid, my child, I have a trans daughter, she honestly, her being trans is the least interesting thing about her. I've said that many times in different fora. The truth is, she has so many other things about her, that are just fascinating and interesting, and she's like every other child, right? All children deserve that opportunity to blossom and to grow and to learn and mature into adulthood, stumble along the way, be helped by a parent. These are the things that we want for our children. And I do think that there are folks out there that we can capture.
I think that there are words that we use in our community that we really relate to, like social justice. And there are several people who have just been silent on this issue because they don't know a trans person. And if they understood that this is a human rights issue and that they showed up for marriage equality, they showed up for civil rights, they marched and protest against Roe versus Wade, or in support of Roe v. Wade, but they're being silent on this issue, they don't realize what an oxymoron that is. They don't realize that the hypocrisy behind that, and the fact that this is a human rights issue and these issues are intertwined, and we're not free until we all get free. And so I think that is the message. I'm with you. I don't think the people who completely are negative, I won't even engage them. I have better things to do with my time. But if you are willing to engage and you believe in equality for all people, and you believe in human rights, then we can have a conversation, because this is a human rights issue. So you tell me why you're silent on this issue.
People sometimes do not know enough about the world. They are in their own silo world, and there is an opportunity for us as we promote advocacy, as we try to reach out to people and tell them what exactly is going on in the world. There will be people who are willing to listen to us. We have to give them that opportunity as well, that yes, we will tell you what is important, this is what it is, and then I think they are going to be either be supportive of our cause, or they will be wanting to fight our cause. And then we know who our friends, who our allies, and who our enemies are.
Attacking a group, a demographic that people don't understand is easy pickings. And once you explain to people that that's what's happening, that denying this care, and going against the medical institution, the medical sciences, the medical boards, you would be screaming if your child couldn't get the ADH, the attention deficit medicine, or if you're bipolar, you know what I mean? You'd be like, okay, so your state legislature is saying no to the medical board. For whatever reason, ideological. It wouldn't make, you're going against the science for what? What is your ideology? What is your reasoning behind that? But you're going after a group that still, by and large, most people don't know about, in knowing that the gender affirmative care, how it's worked with the medical profession, with that industry, there are guidelines, and that it's very important that it follows something. It's not willy-nilly, and you're attacking, a piece of information that people don't know about, and when you inform people, I have found most people go, oh, oh, right.
The fact that we're having these conversations where people have a preset idea of what is right for our children in their heads, and they're not even listening to their own parents about what's in the best interest of our own children, as if I'm not concerned about what's in the best interest of my child. I'm just out here doing stuff willy-nilly. Like, it's not my child. That's the part that I have no patience for. I have no tolerance for. I'm not going to allow you to sit here and tell me something that you read on Reddit or in some QAnon thread about my child, about what's best for my child, when you don't live with my child. You're not there when they're not capable of going to sleep, or they have a nightmare, or they're looking at news and they're scared of something. You're not comforting them. You're not feeding them. You're not clothing them. You're not taking the trips. You're not doing anything. So where do you get off thinking you can tell me how I can raise my child? You must be crazy.
I agree with you
And
wholeheartedly.
So my concern is that, yes, we should act with grace. Yes, we should try to move people from the right to the middle. Yes, we should, try to educate it. But there's a certain point where we're just like, enough's enough. I am not going to take the time to educate you if you're not. I gave my family, every single one of them, the pamphlet from HRC that said how to raise and support transgender and non-binary children. That was the first thing I did, because education is elevation. And so I'm making sure that you have the information that I found. It was helpful to me to understand how to support my child. So I want to make sure you have the same gift that I received to help us all collectively support my child. And when I'm told I'm not going to read that, I could find another link that has information to the contrary. What do you do with that? What? You don't do anything. You recognize what it is that you're dealing with, and you keep it moving. Because if you're not willing to, for your sibling, for your niece or nephew, then what the F am I doing with you?
And I am with you.
And this is not directed for you,
brother.
my brother. This is what I'm saying. This is not for you. You know what I'm saying? I know you are my game.
Listen, I got listen.
Why'd you sit them?
Hold on. I got family too. I know what you're talking about. I am saying, and it doesn't contradict, it doesn't go against anything you just said. I got family too. And that's another story. There are some people where information will be helpful. Period. That's going to be factual facts. And if you would educate them, they're less susceptible to lies after you educate them. Some people are not going to be moved after lies. We know what to do with them. There's a group that doesn't know anything, and if you would educate them, you can get them to do what needs to be done.
Knowing that I feel like there is more things that we're alike than we're different, even with people who find themselves on the other side of this conversation. That it's like, there's something in me that is just like, if you follow that thread through of what you would do for your children, if you follow the thread through of a parent and how much work it is daily to try to figure out all kinds of things for them. What's the best practices for everything? Their food, their school, like all of this, that this has not been entered in lightly. And so to your question, what do you say to your, the people that are your relatives and your friends and all of these people? Like, we've been a living conversation of how much weight we've given to each decision, and how we're looking at our kid and we're really trying to, like, soberly, like as if this is some light thing that we're like, oh yeah, sure, no problem. We're all grappling. We're all trying to figure out. We're all listening. But when I tell you, my child, like, the insistence and the surety that they have of their own, like, who they are, and that's not just one day they woke up. That's like also just like, yes, mommy, this is just me. Mommy, this is just me. Who goes against that and doesn't give that weight? And for the love of your child, I'm like, even if parents are just like, we're grappling with it, let alone the willy-nilliness of which lawmakers act as if we're making these decisions based on just, my kid woke up today and thought, hey, I'm a boy instead of a girl. I'm like, dude, do you know how thick that is? Like, that conversation is so thick, and we have soberly We educated ourselves. We asked questions. We did all of those quote unquote best practices. You make sure, like, how are you doing? You go to the therapist. There's so many hoops that you're jumping through by the time you're getting to anything, whether it's name changing. I'm like, so many things. But I just feel like there are a walk that, and just last thing, my uncle, who is just like, 70s, I hadn't seen him. He hadn't seen our son. He, like, we all came out on our Christmas card the year that our child came out. And we all just wore suits, and was like, announcing and this and that. And he's like, from the first card to when he's finally seeing Zai in the flesh, and that's been 3 years or 4 years, he was like, his whole arc of his conversation in his mind. So he was telling me, he's like, I first was like, what is going on? And then he was like, I watched each card come. Yeah. He's like, I watched your social media, and he's like, I watched the light in his eyes. I watched his spirit. I watched his joy. I watched his, like, how he was doing well in, like, knowing who he was, his creativity, his art. He was like, you brought me around and there was no conversation. Like, I wasn't advocating for him, like, talking to him about I was literally, we were living our lives, and he's watching my child thrive.
Watching closely.
He's watching, and he's
not
like,
for what we're saying, but for how Zai
and he was like, he's like, I had a conversation with somebody else because he's a barber, and he's like, they were saying something. He's like, well, I have a trans nephew. And he seemed to be real good. Like, he seems to be really happy, really thriving, really finding his place in the world. And that was just, I was like, that's just everything to me.
Yeah. I love that. Here's someone who was impacted without a word.
Yes.
Right? Literally just visually. And so one of our counters is trans joy. It's thriving. It's letting them be the amazing kids that they are, despite, all of the oppression that they face. So I love that. And I think that's a reminder to all of us that there are things that we can do that don't involve a huge, loud microphone.
I completely agree with you. I was in India this past summer. My grandmother, she passed away actually 2 months ago, but she was 101. And when I introduced my daughter the first time to her, she knew she was assigned male at birth when she saw her 5-6 years ago. And this is the first time she saw her in her true form, which is herself as a girl. And a 101-year-old lady, with all her cognitive abilities intact, just embraced her. That's it, nothing else. It's like she's my great-granddaughter, nothing more. There was no word spoken, nothing said. After that, she's like, your hair looked too messy.
She shifted right to it.
I need to braid the hair. And then she made her sit in the chair and she started braiding her. And that's it. And that's what gives me hope for all of us, that hope one day everyone will be accepting. And
when they turn 101. I'm just waiting.
Well, that's actually a perfect pivot. What is your hope for the world your trans child or loved one will be in? Like, what gives you hope? What helps you keep going? So, like, whether it's what helps your child thrive or the world you hope to see for them.
I want my daughter to grow up in a world where she does not have to fight for her own rights, for her own existence, for her own acceptance. I want her just to live a life that is ordinary and extraordinary at the same time. And what gives me hope is seeing her with her friends at school. They have always accepted her for exactly who she is. They don't treat her any differently than any of the other girls at school, and as they shouldn't. And so seeing them together and laughing and doing all the things that teenage girls are supposed to do gives me hope.
My daughter's gender identity is the least exciting or amazing thing about her. And my hope for the future for all of our kids, for all of us is that our gender identity and our gender expression is just one aspect of us, not a particularly exciting aspect of us. That we, for all of us, can look beyond how we appear on the outside and instead look for those amazing values and virtues that make us the amazing people that we are. I hate that my daughter has to be so resilient and has to be, so out there in the public. But we had a lawmaker ask her what is this amazing thing that she has learned from playing sports, and she said sports has taught me how to fail. And my hope for the future is that as each of our kids continues to live in a world where they are crafting this future, that they can continue to grow and learn and be more and blossom into their full authentic selves, because not only do they have trans elders that have crafted a path before them, but they also have the love and the support of their families and their caregivers to lift them up and buoy them forward. And that is what gives me joy, is that I know that my daughter is not alone. We are not alone as parents and caregivers, that we form bonds with each other and link arms, and partner shoulder to shoulder to get all of us to that future.
I see the future where my daughter can just be herself, and that anyone can just be themselves. And I think that we're all here fighting for that. Whether it be my daughter or somebody's son or somebody's aunt or uncle, or we're pushing for authenticity as a person, as a human being. It was mentioned, this is a human's rights issue. This is not a transgender issue. This is not a parents' rights issue. This is a human rights issue. And we should all be allowed to live our lives without the interference of others. And I said this in a testimony a couple of years ago or a year ago, that I hate that right now legislative bodies are just legislating bodies. And that's what drives me crazy. I see the person who my daughter is, and she is strong and she is resilient. And what I'm hoping is that allows her the open mind to allow other people be who they are as she grows older, that she will offer that support that she's received. What she brings in, she will give back out times 2, times 10, times 100. And she is severely empathetic, and so she wants to bring in the people. And that's what I hope for everybody.
We don't use the term transgender. We don't talk about being trans at home. It's just not something that comes up in our day-to-day discussion. My hope is for a world where we don't have to, that we are not defined by any labels. We are able to be ourselves. And as we've all said, the fact that my nephew is transgender is the least important thing about him, and it's not even relevant, right? So it doesn't come up for us. And my hope for him is that all of the work we're doing, we are giving them a world where it just doesn't come up for them. It's not relevant. It's not something that people are talking about, that it is a personal thing and it is a label and not one that you have to be defined by.
I'll speak from my heart like everybody else. What I know will happen on the planet that I live on Earth, is this knowing about gender fluidity and plurality will be understood in the current world we live in. Of women owning property at one time in this country was a huge deal. Oh my God. Women voting. Oh my God. Interracial marriage. Oh, what's going to happen? Nothing spectacular. It's going to happen. Nothing earth-shattering. The sun is going to still come up. Having these other understandings of gender is going to be understood, and we're at a point where the current reaction to it is so virulent, has so much vile and bile to it, and what we're going to get to a place where you are just going to be able to be you. We're born now, that we're dealing with other issues. My child is also, African American. So, it's not an understood, in their understanding of the world, the different levels of equality that are being fought for. So the concept of fighting for this is not foreign to them. So that's, when you understand that there are a lot of fronts that human rights is being fought on. So this is another front. And we are going to win. We are going to win. We are going to win. Human rights, equality for all humans is going to be the call and state of the day. Period.
The idea that diversity will be celebrated. The idea that we're not trying to be homogenized. Isn't it incredible that some people are tall and some people are short? Some people have like dark hair and some people have light. Isn't this incredible? Some people are this gender, some people are this. So I would incredibly see, it's like Guardians of the Galaxy. You know what I mean? Like, it's just the idea that there's just so many ways that we exist on this planet, and having a understanding of that and a peacefulness about that and moving on to other things. That would be great. And I see that world. I see us being able to get to that. For my son, he can see himself into the future. Like, he can see for himself, like, what he will, be like at 30 or 40. And before, it was really close-sided, and we could feel that he was just like, why try so hard? Like, if I don't have a future, if everybody's trying to annihilate who I am, why am I working at freaking chemistry? I don't care about, like, if I don't see a future for myself. And so now all of a sudden he's in his future, and I can see it in his eyes, and there's this determination, this excitement, this joy. And I'm like, that's what you want for your kid. Everybody wants that for their kid. Everybody. And so I see that in my kid, and I'm like, I'll do anything, move mountains. We on our way.
I recognize that my child has always had a bubble of protection because of the family into which he was born. Nigerian American, how many generations of Chukwumbas went to college and got advanced degrees, and there's Ivy Leagues, Harvard, Yale, so in my family, I recognize that he's gonna be okay, full stop. Gender, non-gender, doesn't make a difference. And so the hope for my child is just that he keeps doing what he's doing, because there's nothing extraordinary about him. Well, I'm not even going to talk about it. There's nothing extraordinary about him outside of the fact that he was born into this privileged family and he's just doing him. My specific hope for the future is that all of these anti-trans laws fail, are repealed, and the arc of history paints all of these fools that supported them as the fools that they are. That's very specific. That's what I want to say. My hope is that that actually comes to pass, because it's important that history reflects who was on what side of what issue. And as we've seen from all the despots and fascists and, failed states, this will not end well for them. They are on the wrong side of history, and time will tell. And hopefully it will be in their lifetimes. Hopefully it will be while their children still have the ability to say, you effed up, mom, dad, former statesperson. And how dare you? How dare you? Somebody said it earlier, you should feel ashamed. And I want them to live in that shame and be steeped in that shame, for history books to write their shame, because this is a shameful moment in our history. So my kid's gonna be fine, our kids are gonna be fine. Like, my hope is that the people that have put this foolishness and fuckery into motion all reap their rewards.
And I am petty enough to I would love to be able to see it.
Oh my goodness. Super petty. Super petty. I want someone to actually.
I want you to see your mistake.
I want you to be part of history, but not the way you
Not
want
the
to
way
be
you want it to be. I want the fuck around, find out quotient. I want you to be high up.
You were looking around and found out in your
We're like charting out where we're finding out things.
All right, here. What helps your child thrive, and what's the hope for the world they're gonna grow into?
We've had legislators who actually look us in the eye and say, well, good parents would get their kids out of this state if they thought it was going to be a problem what we're doing. Like, they advertised to us, literally said to us, just leave.
And I know that's what they want. And I always said we were not going to be the ones to do that. But, you know, my kid's mental health comes first, and my kid is done and tired. They just want to exist. What I hope is that all of our kids have the chance to exist. Our kids are unapologetic about who they are. And that's what I want for every single kid. The ones who are supported now, the ones who are not. I want them to see that there are parents like us out there fighting for them, so that when they have that moment to be free and speak for themselves, they can be unapologetic about who they are. And that's where we're going.
So what do I have two different things that I'm hopeful for, and that bring me joy. So I'll start personally and just say that what brings me joy is that my daughter, that both kids are healthy and well. That's the first thing that brings me joy. But the second thing specifically about my child who is trans is that she sees a life for herself that is as big as her dream.
Nice.
She wants to be a computer scientist. She wants a job that has a pension. She sees value in a pension. She's very upset that we don't have jobs that have pensions.
Oh, that's fine.
And so I want this life for her that she sees, that, you know, where she can make mistakes and fail forward. I want her to be able to love and be loved. I want her to have the fullness of life. And I hope for that. I also expect it.
Nice.
Yes.
Yeah.
However, one thing that I do definitely want for my child is I don't want anyone to ask her who she is, where she came from, but all I want and hope for her is where she's going to be, and if she can live the life that she wants to live. And one more thing I want to tell my child is she's like the light. She's part of the light that all of us are part of. And once that light passes through a glass prism, once the world sees the light through that glass prism, we become 7 colors of rainbow.
Nice.